people in the gallery. Council, welcome back. I'd like to call to order this Development and Planning Service Committee meeting of Tuesday, September the 3rd. You have an agenda in front of you. Check with staff. First, staff, is there any additions to the agenda?
None from staff, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any additions to the agenda this morning? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to disclosure of interest. Council, any disclosure of interest? Seeing none, we'll go right into reports then, starting with report 5.1, Development Variance Permit Application number VP 486, Bartusek, 1070 Okanagan Avenue Southeast. We have a proposed motion. Is there someone who would like to make that motion to get it on the floor? Councillor Eliason, seconder. Councillor Cannon, thank you. I'll ask the Director of Development Services to explain the first variance permit.
Thank you, Worship. This is a development variance permit application for the property located at 1070 Okanagan Avenue Southeast, a few blocks up from City Hall up the hill. The property is on the south side of Okanagan, near the 11th Street Southeast intersection. The owners of the property are Mr. and Mrs. Bartusek, and what's under application is an accessory building that was constructed back in 2017. This caught the attention of one of our building inspectors, Mr. Reg Walters, who's no longer employed here, retired. And the owners were advised that the siting of the building does not meet the R1 setbacks from the front parcel line or the side parcel line. The variance request is to reduce the minimum setback for an accessory building from the front parcel line from 6 meters to 0.8 meters, to reduce the minimum setback of the same building from an interior east parcel line from 1 meters to 0.5 meters, and section 492, reduce the setback of the same building from a collector street from 16 meters to 10.32 meters. We received the site plan, the detailed site plan showing what the setbacks are exactly a few months ago in the summer, this summer. And so we brought it forward to council, and staff are not recommending support of this variance. Staff rarely, if any time, support variances for buildings closer than 3 meters with a variance request. So that's just our standard line with these. The neighboring property to the east has, the owner of that property has submitted a letter in advance of the public notice, and that's in your package. And I believe the applicants are here today.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. and Mrs. Bartusek, would you like to come forward to the microphone and just tell us a little bit more about your proposal? Good morning, welcome to council.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. The proposal is for a storage shed. We're in need of storage. Basically, when we put the shed down there, because it's so far below the road grade, it doesn't obstruct vision for traffic. And we also need a wood shed also. So that is basically our proposal. Do you have any?
Mrs. Bartusek, did you want to add anything?
No, just that it's down the embankment, and we didn't think that it would obstruct the traffic. And the neighbors, Marion and Mike, they had initially said, no, it's no problem at all. Yeah. And then they wrote in and said that if they had their preference, they wouldn't like it. Yeah. Now they've sold their property, so it's a rental at this point.
Also, it gives us a bit more storage for the new recycling program, with all the storage that we need now for recycling, and a place to put that right now. So kind of keeps it out of sight for containers, and basically that would be about it, I guess. Do you have any more questions about it?
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming forward and speaking to us. I'll just see if council has any questions they might like to ask. Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. Thanks for being here. And I think most of council, usually when we have applications coming forward, we go by the property, and certainly going up Okanagan, notice the property all the time. And it's been a nice job. I'm not sure, did you do the renovations on the property?
Yes.
Yeah, so a nice job. Is there a rental suite in the property?
It was my mother-in-law's suite. My mother-in-law lived there right now, and my niece lives there now.
Okay.
In the bottom.
But we don't use it as a suite, it's kind of like we're not charging her what we could, it's just to help her out, so,
Okay. And is that a legal suite?
no.
No, and it's always been there since we bought the house. It's always been a suite, I guess. Our mother-in-law suite. It's always been a mother-in-law suite since we purchased it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Any other questions? Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Worship. And quick question, the neighbors' letter, they say that yes, they had no problem with it originally, but they thought it was gonna be a smaller, just one of the ones you buy from Costco or Walmart or Home
I
Hardware.
believe she thought that, yes.
My question is related to that. It's clearly not, and they're concerned about that. It's a lot bigger than they anticipated. That leads to my next question. Is it on a foundation or is it movable like one of those would be?
We would have to take it apart and
It
move
is
it.
movable, it's on,
It's on skids, like it's on
Is
the
on
proper
skids.
blocks, like that.
and skids.
So it is or isn't movable?
It is movable, yes.
Movable, okay. And then I'll have a question for staff. Thank you.
When I did talk to her, I did tell her how big it was gonna be, and maybe she just didn't realize. I did give her the dimensions when we talked it over, but
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'm just wondering about the height of the building. Is what we see there now, we have a picture of it on Appendix 5. I'm not sure if we can bring up Appendix 5. And there it is. Especially can we bring up the bottom? Well, that one's fine. Maybe the bottom picture there is a little clearer for us. See? Thank you very much. So it's covered kind of with plastic or something. Now, is that the height of the building, or is there something going on top of that?
no, that is the height, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I'll just see. Any other questions? All right. You can have a seat. We appreciate it. I'll open it up to questions for staff. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Worship. And the Director of Development Services, when he did his intro, stated that we generally never allow, I'm guessing he's referring to the front line setback, less than 3 meters. Is that correct?
Yes, well, it's basically staff's perspectives on variance applications. We rarely support any variance less than 3 meters, but council has supported variances less than 3 meters.
Yeah. So, do you have any issue with the other two setbacks, or is it mostly the front line that's right down to 0.8, I believe it was?
The other setback from the interior lot line of 0.5 meters. We don't know if that wall is fire rated and meets the building code. We haven't done an inspection on the building, but that would be a requirement. If council approved the variance, then they would need a building permit.
And fire inspection and all of that.
Basically, this wall would have to have a certain fire rating.
So it might be easier to try to move the building than deal with all that. Okay. So you don't have a concern with just the front line, you also have a concern with that interior lot line with regards to fire code?
That's the only technical issue is the fire code, and from a neighborly perspective, whether the new property owner to the east, if it impacts them or not, I guess we'll find out at the hearing because they've been notified.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Eliason.
Okay, right now we're talking about something we can see, but the general rule of thumb is it's supposed to be away from the property line, and it's, how big is the storage shed supposed to be?
Director of Development Services?
How big? Well, it's about 200 square feet.
Yeah, I know, this is, so, but if I was to build a shed without a permit, it'd be 100 square feet, or 96 square feet, or 106 square feet, I believe.
Right, so to avoid a building permit, if you're 10 meters square or less, you don't need a building permit, but the structure still has to be set back 6 meters from the front.
Okay, and any garden structure like that also has to be 1 meter away from the property line?
Yeah.
Okay, and the reason why we request the center line setback and the front yard setback is for the potential future expansion of Okanagan Avenue?
That's correct.
Okay, so if we were to come along at a later date and say that we had to expand Okanagan Avenue because we've grown as a city and it now needs to have 4 lanes or more lanes or parking or bike lanes or anything like that, we would need that land and we wouldn't want to have to encroach on somebody's shed. Is that correct?
That's correct, and in this case, the siting as it is now wouldn't impact the widening of Okanagan. We've looked at that.
Okay. But it'd be really close.
Yes.
On another note, so if the proponent wanted to put up 2 smaller sheds in a similar area that were temporary or portable and not on a permanent foundation to accommodate the storage that they requested, it'd be much easier and likely not require a permit or a setback variance as long as they're 1 meter away from the property line of the neighbor.
And 6 meters from the...
And 6 meters, so they'd have to rejig the configuration, but then they wouldn't be required to meet all the building codes and get a building permit, is that correct?
If it's 10 square meters or less.
Because this is basically 2 10-meter sheds side by each, so if they were to replace that with 2 options, then they could do a similar function with non-permanent buildings, is that correct?
Yeah, Your Worship, in terms of options on the site, when you look at the air photo and even when you drive by the site, it looks like there are options other than where it is now, but there might be reasons why it is not located on those optional locations.
Okay, so my last question is, if we approve this said shed under the R1 zoning, that runs with the property forever. So that property has a variance for a setback of a 0.5 meter from the neighbor's property line and very close to the Okanagan Avenue line, right? So if it wasn't this shed, if they chose to put up a carport there instead, then there'd be no reason for them to come for a variance because they'd already have their side and front line setbacks in place. So they could potentially build a 2-car garage there, really close to Okanagan, really close to their neighbors.
Yes, there's lots of hypothetical scenarios.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Those are my questions right now.
Thank you, Councillor Eliason. Councillor Lavery?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship, could I have Appendix 5, please? And just that, the top picture, if we could. And I guess I do want to, Your Worship, keep my comments solely to the application in front of us, but this raises a whole can of worms for me in terms of what's been done historically, what's done in the past, what the consistency is, where do we stop with the consistency, and I won't go into those now, but I certainly have to, and it's a bit of a sidebar here, but through you, Your Worship, to staff, so is the left-hand, the stairs and the left-hand pony wall, are they essentially requiring a variance as well, given my rough math?
These stairs?
Yeah, and to the left of that, towards Okanagan. If we require, are they fine? Do we know that?
They look fine. It depends when they were built.
Yeah, okay.
And if they're under 4 feet in height or 1.2 meters in height, then they don't need a permit.
So in terms of being away from the property line?
Yeah, I think this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this structure here is quite historical.
Yeah, okay. At this stage, I'll just stay away from the historical stuff for now. I'd like to talk to staff afterwards about that, but thank you, Worship. My tendency right now is to support the staff rationale.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. What is the consequence of non-compliance? Through you to staff. And the reason I ask is because I think we have to be mindful that there are a lot of non-compliant sheds. And it would be important for me to understand whether there's a consequence to that.
Director of Development Services.
That's a difficult question to answer. So if council were to approve this variance and the applicants applied for a building permit, and if the building met code, there'd be no consequences.
Okay.
Okay, conversely, I think Councillor Wallace Richmond is thinking. I'll let you go ahead and ask the questions.
I guess my question was if we were to reject this variance, follow the staff recommendation, the outcome could be non-compliance.
Oh, I see. If council rejected the variance, then the shed would have to be moved.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace Richmond. Councillor Cannon.
Thank you. And further to that question, if the shed has to be moved, is it, what I was reading in here is that it could possibly be moved because of the way that the foundations have been done on it? And if, like, what's the timeline if the variance doesn't get approved and they have to move it? What is the city's role in making sure that that happens?
Director of Development Services.
The city's role is to enforce the zoning bylaw and the building bylaw and order it to be removed.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cannon. Do councillors have any other questions at this time? Okay, I have a couple of questions. So what height is allowed if we were to, sort of like, it's like what Councillor Eliason was aiming at, I think. If we were to allow the variance here, and for 2.6 I said they plan on keeping it at this height, but they may not be the only owners of this house in the future. How high is an accessory building allowed to be?
19.7 feet or 6 meters.
Okay, how high is this one right now?
I don't know.
Okay, it looks like about 10 feet.
It's not 6 meters, but it's definitely under the maximum height.
Okay. So looking at that doorway, I'm just trying to figure it out. So it's probably about 4 meters, maybe.
Yeah, the applicant might know.
Do you know how high it is? 10 feet, okay. So if we were to pass this variance, a different owner could add about 10 more feet to that building without having to come to council, is that right?
Not necessarily. You're adding height to a structure that has received a variance, but it's still encroaching into the setback area. So you're making it more non-conforming by adding height.
So would they have to come for another variance?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so the variance, if we were to pass this variance today, that's as high as that building could be?
Yeah.
Okay. And then looking at Schedule B, it's on page 5. Just looking at options. So the right-of-way at the bottom, that's a city right-of-way?
Yes, I'm guessing it's for sanitary sewer from the age of it.
Okay, you're not allowed to put a shed on there?
No.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Those are my questions. I'll ask, council has a few more. Councillor Flynn first.
Thank you, Worship, and for an opportunity to ask some more questions. Now that we've got this appendix up, I'll start with this one. Am I correct in understanding if we moved the shed down in this picture away from Okanagan and at least dealt with that variance, that would then create 2 walls that need to be fireproofed, one bordering the house and one bordering the property?
Possibly. It depends how far it's shifted down, but yeah, I would say so.
Okay. So I guess we've already talked about it. There's all kinds of non-conforming sheds all over our community. There's all kinds of non-conforming illegal suites. And we don't necessarily enforce them. But in this case, I think the applicant might want to reconsider in light of the fact that they may have to make that shed, storage shed, more like a house with regards to fireproofing if it stays where it is or moves away from Okanagan. Is that correct?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
It's likely that there'll be more stringent building code issues if they stay as close to the neighbors as they are and stay as close. And even if we shifted it, I'm looking for options to move it slightly south. I don't know if that's south, sorry, slightly down in the picture. But then they would probably have a fire code issue near their house as well.
Yeah, I'm assuming that would be the case.
Okay. And then if we could go to Appendix 3, I believe it is. Just because the colors don't quite match, but I'm assuming that is on my map, the orange doesn't match, but I'm assuming this is all designated high density?
Yes.
And if we were talking high density, and somebody buying that property for high density, they could build a lot closer to lot lines. Am I correct with that assumption?
They could build 5 meters.
Okay,
If it was a high density building.
So not much closer. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Eliason.
I guess I'm a little confused after the answers to Mayor Harrison's questions, so through you to staff. If this variance passes, they'll have the front and side yard setbacks approved to a 1/2 meter and to closer to the Okanagan. If they decided that they no longer needed a woodshed and wanted to put a 2-car garage there within that variance zone in front of the house, how high could that building be?
Maximum 6 meters,
Okay.
but they might need a variance if it's in the same spot, unless the portion of the building met setbacks that was higher.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't, if we approve this, that's it. So, seeing that, I think that it might be in the best interest of the applicants to move the storage shed. It might be an inconvenience, but I think in the long term, it might be more convenient for them and protect the integrity of our bylaws. So, I don't want to give false hope, so I'll vote against the proposed variances. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any other questions? Could we just look at the Appendix 2? I just want to ask the applicants a question related to that. Do you mind just coming back up the microphone? Sorry, I just want to make sure I understand this fully. So you can hear that there's certainly some concern regarding the setback variances. Is it possible to locate your building in your backyard instead of in your front?
Yes.
So it looks like you have, is that a couple of cars parked there, or I couldn't really tell?
Yeah, it is. And we're prepared to move it.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you very much, appreciate it. And then if we can go to if we can just go to back to Appendix 5. First of all, I appreciate what you're trying to do here. My concern is not so much about the setbacks from Okanagan. My concern's about the setback as we look at this picture on the left-hand side. Because that small, I think if I was the neighbor, the McKees, if it doesn't matter if it's a rental or not, I can see there's gonna be water problems there. Cause all that water on that roof is gonna flow right back into their yard. And, if I was a neighbor there, I would be concerned. I think their letter is a very nice letter, and, they're trying to work with you. I could see that. But the thing is, neighbors change over time. And, so for those reasons, I just can't support your variance, and hearing perhaps you can move it to the backyard. If there is a variance needed there, I'd be much more open to it. Okay, council, any other speakers? All those in favor? Okay, could we have the motion read again, please?
Moved by Councillor Eliason, seconded by Councillor Cannon, that the Development and Planning Services Committee recommends to Council that VP 486 be authorized for issuance for Lot 3, Plan 1255 to vary zoning bylaw 2303 as follows. We reduce the minimum setback for an accessory building from the front parcel line from 6 to 0.8 meters. Reduce the minimum setback for an accessory building from the east interior side parcel line from 1 to 0.5 meters. And reduce the minimum setback for an accessory building from a collector street from 16 meters to 10.32 meters.
Okay, and I'll just see, I think a couple of councillors that may have spurred some questions for them, so I won't call the question quite yet. Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Worship. And related to your comment about the backyard, and I'm glad to hear it can be moved. I can't support the variance request as it stands. But related to your question, if it got moved to the backyard, this is for staff, and if it needed a variance back there, is that a whole new variance application and a whole new fee and all of those things? Or in working with us, do we have some flexibility to change the variance request?
Yeah, Your Worship, I don't know the answer to that.
Of course,
I'd
I
have
asked
to
a question.
defer to the CAO, maybe.
It would mean a new application.
And full new fee, and we couldn't say grandfather the payment or anything like that, or we'd have to make that exception.
Council could do that. That would be very rare that would happen.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wallace-Richmond?
Thanks, Your Worship. One question and then one comment. Would a covenant be possible that this would only be allowed for this shed and these owners, or?
Director of Development Services?
No, Your Worship, a covenant would not be necessary because the variance would act
All right,
in a similar manner.
Okay, well, with that answer, then basically, regardless of what we decide today, something has to change. So either you have to move the shed or you have to change the shed. There's no way to vote today for nothing to happen, nothing different to happen. So I hope this is an opportunity to rethink the situation. I can't grant the variance as it is requested, so for that reason, I'll be voting against it.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace-Richmond. Any other comments before I call a question? All those in favor? All those opposed? It's unanimously opposed. Thank you. It will go to regular council meeting, Chief Administrative Officer.
Yes, it will.
For further discussion and vote at that time.
Yes.
On whether to go to third reading. And that would be on next Monday.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm sure the Director of Development Services will be in touch with the Bar-2-6 prior to that. All right, let's move ahead then to item 2, Development Variance Permit Application VP 503, Chahal Gil Candola, 1170 15th Street Southeast, setback requirements. We have a proposed motion. Is there a mover? Councillor Eliason, seconded. Councillor Cannon. I'll ask the Director of Development Services to outline the proposed variance.
Your Worship, this is a development variance permit application for the property located at 1170 15th Street Southeast. It's at the intersection of 15th Street Southeast and 12th Avenue Southeast. It's a fairly large property as it is now, and there's an older duplex that's been on the property for a long time. The property is zoned R2, duplex zone. To the north is a property with R4 zoning for a fourplex. The neighborhood is mostly single-family, low-density residential. This property has been under application for subdivision for a couple of years. The applicants have had a few extensions on their PLA. I don't see them here today. They were invited to the meeting. But it looks like they are ready to try and finalize this subdivision, which is for 2 additional lots for single-family homes in the R2 zone. I'll get the site plan here. Sorry, 3 additional lots. Proposed lot 2, proposed lot 3, and proposed lot 4. Proposed lot 4 would be accessed from 12th Street. And they would like to keep the existing deck as it stands now. And if they do, there would be a setback encroachment of the deck in relation to the new property to the north of 25 centimeters. It's very minuscule, and if it's subdivided, well, there's nobody living there now. This shed would be moved, has to go for the subdivision to be approved. The variance has to be approved for the subdivision to proceed. The other option is to adjust this parcel line here and to move it further north, shift it 25 centimeters to the north. But then a variance would be needed for the parcel width. So in staff's opinion, it makes more sense to have a wider lot and to allow for a variance here. This one is supported by staff.
Thank you very much. We'll see if there's questions from council. I see the applicants are not present. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. Not a lot of questions, just a comment. It's interesting we're dealing with parcel line setbacks, and one is quite clearly different than the other. I completely support staff's recommendation on this one. The only people impacted are the people in the existing house, and they're not really impacted, but the people buying the new lot, and they probably wouldn't even know that there's a setback variance when they buy the lot. So to me, this makes sense. It's perfect infill. This allows for 3 new single-family lots, and as I stated, the people buying the lot will be the only ones that would be impacted, and they would know that, or they wouldn't even realize it, one or the other. So I do support this. And clearly the deck, or not the deck, clearly the outbuildings have to go because it would be hard to build a house with them there.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Eliason.
Yeah, thanks. I think staff groups these together because we're so forgetful, and we would ask the same questions this month as we would in 2 weeks, and again in 2 weeks. I'm like, how far can they be set back? No offense to my colleagues on a happy Tuesday. Not related to this variance. This doesn't look like an infill subdivision. It looks like they're getting this many lots. And we're not dealing with it right now, but sidewalks, curb, gutter, street lights, all of those things, does that come to us at another point, or are the applicants not wanting to bring that up at this point and do one variance at a time? Or will we be expecting variances for servicing at a future date for sidewalks and curb, gutter, storm?
Director of Development Services.
I guess the applicants have been well aware that they have to do quite a few road upgrades and improvements. So they didn't elect to apply for a variance with it, and they could have.
Okay, thanks. I support this. I think it's a creative infill in this area. And see what happens in public hearing.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Okay, I just want to confirm the public hearing date. The public hearing date probably would be October, is that right? Because we don't have a second meeting in September.
Your worship, it would be next Monday. This variance and the previous application, they only go to one council meeting.
Yes, thank you. So it would be next council meeting. So I think it would be good if the applicants were, it was recommended the applicants be at the meeting. There may be questions from council that would increase their chances of the variance passing probably. All right, I see no more questions. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Okay, we'll move forward to official community plan amendment application, OCP 4000-39, Mutual Holdings, 130 Shuswap Street Southeast, institutional to high-density residential. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Eliason, Councillor Cannon, thank you. We'll do these one at a time, so we'll do the official community plan one first. I'd ask the Director of Development Services to explain the application.
Your Worship, this property is located at 130 Shuswap Street Southeast, adjacent to the Anglican Church. It was previously owned by the Anglican Church. It has been designated in the official community plan as institutional for land use and zoned P3 institutional for a long time, probably prior to 95 when the zoning bylaw came into effect. It was, there was a house on the property, and that was owned by the church, and it was probably used by the church. The house is no longer there. The Mutos purchased the property earlier this year, and they would like to build a multifamily development. In order to do so, they have to change the OCP designation to high-density residential and change the zoning to R5, and that's what's being proposed.
Great, thank you very much. And I see there's a representative from the Muto family here, I believe. Oh.
That's Nicole from Brown Johnson.
Oh, yes. Sorry, Nicole, from up here we can't, well, I can't speak for my colleagues. I can't really see you.
I think that's age-related.
It is, definitely. All right. I'll open it up to council then on the OCP piece of this. Any comments? Councillor Lassen.
Very familiar with the area, very familiar with the property. I support this, and I think it's the right move, and I think we may see more of this in the future from faith-based property owners.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, hearing none, my comments are similar to Councillor Lyson's. I think this is exactly the kind of density we're hoping for there. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. We'll move then to the zoning piece that's related to this. Zoning amendment application 1153 Muto Holdings, same property. We have a proposed motion. Have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Wallace-Richmond, Councillor Lavery. I'll ask the Director of Development Services to explain the proposal.
The proposal is to rezone the property from P3 institutional to R5 high-density residential. If the bylaw is approved by council and the Ministry of Transportation, the next step would be for the applicant to apply for a development permit for form and character. We don't have that application yet from the developer. They did submit a site concept, very preliminary, and that was done about 4 or 5 months ago. There are a few issues with the site concept. One of them being it shows access from Shuswap Street, and our zoning bylaw, our subdivision servicing bylaw does not encourage access from an arterial street such as Shuswap. It attempts to minimize accesses as much as possible, and in this case there is potential for access from the lane as shown in this picture along the east side of the property. That's really the only issue staff see, and we're hoping that the applicant can come up with a development plan that can meet the access requirement, and staff would be likely willing to support a setback variance in the front yard to enable the density that they're wanting if they were to construct access from the lane. But that would be a council decision. So I'm kind of looking a bit far down the road here, or the lane, but there's other things to consider in the meantime, and that's changing the land use and the zoning.
Thank you. Councillor Lassen.
Thanks, Your Worship, and I think that the zoning here is suitable. The area, if you look at this street, there are apartment buildings along the entire street. The laneway access is fine for the apartment building at the end, which is adjacent to the Barley Station parking. So maybe some upgrades to that. I would support a front yard setback if that was required for this property. Access off Shuswap Street is impossible, just mostly because of the grade of the property. You do have to go up. There is a retaining wall, that type of stuff. So, and it's busy. And when we connect Auto Road to the top of Shuswap Street, it's only going to get busier because you get Silver Creek traffic and you get either Shoemaker Hill or Auto Road or Fifth, whatever it is now. So it is a busy street. We want to keep as few driveways as possible, but I would support something. But knowing about the bank across next to Husky, there's a steep embankment where the road is continually sort of sloughing or sloping, or the road's kind of pushing away. I would still want to make sure that we had enough room to expand Shuswap if we needed to increase traffic, because the more that we, not to belabor it, but the more we cut off access to and from the downtown core for turning accesses and north-south accesses, Shuswap will become increasingly busy and require maybe less on-street parking and more roads for travel. So I support the zoning, but I think we have to be cognizant of the potential traffic impacts that will happen on Shuswap in the future.
Great, thank you. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. I will vote to support, and not to get ahead of ourselves, but clearly there's some issues with access and staff concerns there. But I think we just need to deal with the land use and the zoning, so I will vote in support.
Thank you. Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Harrison. And I debated whether we do it in the OCP or the zoning part, but I just had a question through you to staff or perhaps the representative for the applicant. Are these to be rental or market purchase? Do we know that at this stage?
Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, the intent is to stratify. So whether they are rented after they're stratified or not, I don't know.
Thank you for that. And actually, regardless of the answer, it doesn't change my support for the project. But what I was going to mention is, through the applicant, and I'm going to offer both Councillor Wallace-Richmond's and my connections as well, if that would be helpful. But there are some very interesting incentivization plans through BC Housing on the entry-level market side of things that require some commitment from the developer, the applicant, although I would say it's fairly minimal given an experienced applicant. But permit options to reduce the threshold for getting into purchase units, again, all subsidized and incentivized by the provincial government through BC Housing and the Housing Hub. So I would just put that out there, and we'd certainly be, and it may or may not fit the intention of the applicant, but just to ensure that that information is transmitted, either Councillor Wallace-Richmond or I could do that, or both of us.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Appreciate that comment. Any other comments on this application? Could I just ask the Director of Development Services about Appendix 7, the letter from MOTI and Tara Knight, and staff's feelings about the request?
Your Worship, we've seen that comment before from the ministry, and I think it's the ministry staff in the development approvals branch locally that are suggesting the city put money aside, whether it's in a development cost charge fund or some other reserve, towards intersection improvements of the Trans-Canada Highway.
Okay, thank you very much. I will support moving this ahead to public hearing. And I agree with the council's comments regarding access off of the back rather than off of the front, but just exactly the density that we're looking for in this area, and it fits in well with the community, so I will also support. Just checking with the CEO, pretty sure I've got this one right. So the public hearing would be October 15th, is that correct?
Your worship, if I may, because it's an OCP amendment, first reading would be considered next Monday, and then second reading only would be considered at the first meeting in October. So not the public hearing?
Okay, so the public hearing would be the 28th of October, assuming it
Yes.
moves forward. Okay, that's good to know. Thank you very much. Any other questions? All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you. We have a motion to adjourn.
Moved by Councillor Lavery, seconded by Councillor Wallace Richmond, that the Development and Planning Services Committee meeting of September 3rd, 2019 be adjourned.
All those in favor? Thank you guests, thank you staff and council. Council, we're going to meet in room 100 just for a